First contact at Stellar Academy. The crystalline spires of the Stellar Combat Academy pierced the purple sky of Nexus Prime, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 setting suns. Inside the Grand Hall, hundreds of beings from across the galaxy gathered for the start of the new training cycle. Floating orbs of light cast a soft glow over scales, feathers, chitinous plates, and, for the first time in the Academy's 1,000-year history, human skin. Sarah Chen stood at attention, her standard-issue uniform crisp despite the 30-hour journey from Earth. At 5'9", she was dwarfed by the towering Arctians with their 4 arms and reinforced exoskeletons. To her left, a Meridian's crystalline form pulsed with barely contained energy. Yet Sarah's posture remained perfect, her expression calm and focused. "Candidate Chen," rumbled Director Vexthor, his compound eyes scanning her with obvious curiosity. The Thoraxian administrator's mandibles clicked softly as he consulted his datapad. "Your test scores are unexpected. You completed the endurance trials without any biological enhancements." "Yes, Director," Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady despite the whispers that rippled through the hall. "Standard human physiology, sir." A Meridian cadet named Zarek let out a dismissive chime, the sound translating clearly through their universal communicators. "Impossible. Their species has no natural armor, no regenerative capabilities, no enhanced strength. The trials would have killed them." "Yet here I stand," Sarah said simply, earning a few surprised looks at her calm response. Director Vexthor's mandibles clicked again, this time in what passed for amusement among his species. "Indeed you do, Candidate Chen. Though I must inform you that our training regimens were designed for species with considerable natural advantages. We cannot adjust the standards for—" "I don't ask for adjustments, sir," Sarah interrupted, earning more whispers. "Just the opportunity to prove what humans can do." The director studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Very well. Squad assignments will be posted at dawn." Dismissed. As the candidates filed out of the Grand Hall, Sarah felt the weight of countless alien gazes, some curious, some dismissive, some openly hostile. She'd expected this. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, seen as primitive by many species. Their acceptance into the Academy had been controversial, with many arguing that humans were too physically fragile for the elite training program. In her assigned quarters, Sarah began her usual evening routine. While other species required specialized environmental controls or regeneration chambers, she simply changed into exercise gear and began a series of precise movements. The Academy's slightly lower gravity meant she had to adjust her technique, but years of training had taught her adaptation. A knock at her door revealed Karax, an Arxian female whose exoskeleton gleamed with iridescent markings of rank. "Human," she said, the translator struggling slightly with her accent. "You are assigned to my squad. I must know your limitations." Sarah paused her exercises, noting how the Arxian's upper arms remained close to her weapon holsters. "What would you like to know?" "Your endurance ratings, your recovery time, your breaking points." Karax's secondary eyes narrowed. "We cannot carry weak links." "Then test me," Sarah replied, rising smoothly to her feet. "The training grounds are open all night, aren't they?" Karax's mandibles twitched in surprise, either at the suggestion or at Sarah's knowledge of Academy protocols. "You would risk injury before classes even begin." Sarah smiled, a gesture that many alien species still found unsettling. The only way to understand human limitations is to find them. "Shall we?" The Academy's nighttime training grounds were bathed in artificial moonlight, the obstacle courses and combat rings standing silent and ready. As Sarah and Kirax approached, other curious cadets emerged from nearby barracks. Word spread quickly in an institution full of beings evolved for hunting and warfare. "Parameters?" Sarah asked, stretching her shoulders as whispered bets were placed among the gathering crowd. Kirax gestured to the most brutal of the obstacle courses, the one designed for heavy gravity species with natural armor. "Complete this without stopping. Then maybe I'll believe your trial scores weren't a malfunction. Sarah's only response was to move to the starting line. As the course's sensors detected her presence, red warning lights began to flash. Caution, the automated system announced. Course calibrated for Class 4 resilience rating. Detected participant. Class 1. Override required. Override granted. Kirex called out, her tone making it clear she expected this to be a short and humbling demonstration. The warning lights turned green. Sarah took a deep breath, centered herself, and began to run. What followed would be discussed in the Academy's halls for years to come. Where others relied on natural armor, Sarah demonstrated precision and efficiency of movement. When brute strength wouldn't suffice, she showed creative problem-solving. Most importantly, she never stopped moving. The gathered cadets fell silent as she approached the course's infamous final challenge, a gauntlet of hydraulic pillars designed to test impact resistance. Even with an exoskeleton, it was brutal. Without one, Sarah didn't hesitate. She entered the gauntlet at full speed, her movements becoming a fluid dance between the pillars. When a hit was unavoidable, she turned it into controlled falls, redirecting momentum instead of absorbing impact. It wasn't pretty, but it was effective. As she crossed the finish line, breathing hard but steady, the training ground systems chimed. Course complete. Time. Standard plus 47 seconds. Survival rating. Exceptional. Kirex stood very still, all four hands clasped behind her back. You're bleeding, she noted, pointing to a scrape on Sarah's arm. Surface damage only, Sarah replied, wiping away the small amount of blood. Our bodies are good at repairs. You feel pain, yet you continued. It wasn't quite a question. Pain is information, Sarah said, starting her cool-down stretches. Sometimes you need to acknowledge it and keep moving anyway. The gathered cadets began to disperse, their discussions now notably different in tone. Kirex remained, her primary eyes fixed on Sarah, while her secondary ones tracked the departing crowd. Perhaps, the Archean said finally, there is more to your species than our data suggested. Report for squad training at dawn. Do not be late. As Sarah watched her new squad leader leave, she allowed herself a small smile. It was a start. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new prejudices to overcome. But tonight, she had shown them something they didn't expect. That humanity's strength lay not in natural armor or enhanced abilities, but in the simple, stubborn refusal to accept limitations. The three moons of Nexus Prime continued their dance overhead, casting shifting shadows across the Academy's grounds. Somewhere in the distance, tomorrow's warning bells began to chime. The trial of elements. 3 weeks into the training cycle, the Academy's weather control systems activated before dawn. Artificial storm clouds gathered above the training grounds, their surfaces crackling with controlled lightning. Below, Squad Kirex assembled in environmental gear, their forms barely visible through the growing tempest. Sarah Chen checked her suit seals one final time. Unlike the naturally armored Archeans or the energy-based Meridians, she relied entirely on her equipment and training to survive what was coming. The trial of elements was infamous, a test of endurance against artificially generated extreme conditions. Remember, Kirex's voice crackled through their comm systems. This is not just about survival. Each squad will defend their assigned sector while dealing with environmental hazards. Fail either objective, and the entire squad fails. The human felt the weight of her squad mates' gazes, despite proving herself in daily training. Doubt lingered. Their sector would face temperatures ranging from near freezing to scorching, accompanied by electrical storms and toxic gas pockets. Even with protection, it would push everyone to their limits. Sectors assigned, the Academy's AI announced. Trial commences in 3 minutes, weather patterns unlocked, environmental hazards active. Zarek, the Meridian who had once dismissed Sarah's capabilities, floated closer. Your suit's thermal regulation seems inadequate. They chimed, genuine concern mixing with their usual condescension. It'll hold, Sarah replied, double-checking her weapon. Focus on maintaining your crystalline form in the cold zones. The first blast of Arctic wind howled through their sector, carrying stinging particles of ice. The squad moved into formation, their backs to a reinforced bunker that served as their defense point. Sarah took point on the ground, while Zarek provided aerial reconnaissance, their crystalline form refracting the storm's lightning in beautiful but dangerous patterns. The attack came as temperatures plummeted to -40 degrees. Hostile training drones emerged from the storm, their weapons loaded with debilitating but non-lethal rounds. Sarah's fingers, despite the suit's heating, began to lose sensation. Still, her shots found their marks with mechanical precision. Movement on the western approach, she called out, her breath freezing inside her helmet. Pattern suggests stealth-class drones. Kirax chittered an acknowledgement, directing the squad to adjust their formation. The Archean leader had learned to trust Sarah's tactical insights, especially after discovering humans' talent for pattern recognition. The temperature swung wildly as the trial progressed. Freezing wind gave way to searing heat, then back again. The rapid changes caused even the environmentally resistant Archeans to struggle with their coordination. Sarah's suit warnings flashed constantly, its systems straining to compensate. During a particularly vicious heat spike, a drone breached their perimeter. Its shot caught Sarah in the leg, the impact combining with suit damage to expose her skin to the elements. Pain flared, sharp and immediate. "Chand is compromised," Zarek announced, their tone suggesting they expected her to call for extraction. Instead, Sarah adjusted her position, compensating for the injury. Negative. Maintaining defensive line. "Your suit integrity is failing," Kirax noted, all 4 arms firing in continuous defense. "Temperature extremes will cause tissue damage." Noted, Sarah replied through gritted teeth, requesting covering fire for position adjustment. The squad responded instantly, laying down suppressing fire as Sarah moved to a more protected position. She could feel the temperature fluctuations directly on her exposed skin now, alternating between burning and freezing. Her medical training told her she was accumulating damage that would require treatment. Her military training told her to keep fighting. Hours passed in a blur of environmental alerts and defensive actions. The drones grew more aggressive, their attack patterns more complex. Squad members rotated positions, supporting each other as fatigue set in. Through it all, Sarah remained at her post, her movements becoming more economical but no less effective. When the final drone fell and the storms began to subside, Squad Kirax stood undefeated. Their sector's defenses had held. As medical teams approached for the standard post-trial evaluation, Sarah finally allowed herself to acknowledge the full extent of her injuries. "Impossible," the medical officer, a thoraxian specialist, muttered while examining her. "These readings indicate you were operating with significant nerve damage for the last 2 hours. The pain alone should have incapacitated you." Sarah managed a tired smile. "Pain is information." "Yes," Kirax interrupted, stepping into the medical bay. "So you have said, but information can be interpreted." All 4 of her eyes focused on Sarah. "You interpret it differently than most species. Humans adapted to persist through injury," Sarah explained, wincing as regenerative gel was applied to her wounds. "In our evolution, endurance hunting meant following prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Sometimes that meant continuing despite our own injuries." The medical officer's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Fascinating and disturbing." "Effective," Kirax corrected. "The squad's performance ratings were highest in our sector. It seems human endurance compensates for their structural weaknesses." Sarah accepted the backhanded compliment with a nod. The trial of elements had proved something she'd known all along. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their bodies, but in their stubborn determination to continue despite their limitations. Later, reviewing the trial footage, the Academy's instructors would note something interesting. During the worst of the storm, when conditions approached lethal levels, it wasn't just Sarah who had displayed unexpected resilience. The entire squad had fought with increased determination, pushing past their own species' typical endurance limits. As she lay in the medical bay, allowing her body's remarkable healing abilities to work, Sarah reflected on this. Perhaps humanity's real gift to the galaxy wasn't their physical capabilities, but their ability to inspire others to push beyond their perceived limits. It was a thought that brought a smile to her face as she finally allowed herself to rest. Outside, the artificial storms dissipated completely, revealing a sky painted with the colors of 3 setting suns. Another day at the academy was ending, but its lessons would resonate far beyond the training grounds. The trial of elements had tested more than their ability to endure physical extremes. It had challenged preconceptions about strength, endurance, and the true nature of resilience. Breaking point. The Academy's combat simulator hummed with energy as Squad Kirax prepared for their routine training exercise. 2 months had passed since the trial of elements, and the squad had risen to become one of the top-performing units in their class. Today's scenario was meant to be straightforward. A hostage extraction simulation in low-gravity conditions. Sarah Chen triple-checked her mag boots as the simulation chamber's gravity began to decrease. Around her, her squad mates made their own preparations. Zarek's crystalline form pulsed with stored energy, while Kirex's exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber's harsh lights. Remember, Kirax addressed the squad. This is a precision exercise. No unnecessary risks. The simulation chamber's walls shimmered as the holographic environment materialized. A derelict space station, its corridors twisted and broken. Sarah's motion tracker immediately began picking up signatures. Training drones programmed to act as hostiles. The first warning that something was wrong came from the station's real security systems, not the simulation. Alert. Unauthorized access detected. Security protocols compromised. Alert. Kirax's secondary eyes narrowed. That's not part of the simulation. The chamber's holographic environment flickered and died, leaving them floating in the dimmed room. Then the real emergency lights activated, bathing everything in harsh red. This is not a drill. Director Vexthor's voice cut through all communication channels. The Academy is under attack. All combat-ready units prepare for defensive operations. This is not a drill. Sarah's training kicked in immediately. Motion sensors still active. Multiple signatures approaching from the maintenance corridors. Real weapons only. Kirax ordered, her 4 arms already drawing her combat gear. Formation Delta. They had barely taken positions when the chamber's maintenance door exploded inward. Through the smoke came figures in sleek combat suits, pirates, using the simulation exercise as cover for their infiltration. The first exchange of fire was brutal. These weren't training drones with stun weapons. These were hardened criminals with military-grade hardware. A plasma burst caught Sarah in the side, burning through her armor and searing flesh. The pain was immediate and intense, but she forced it down, keeping her weapon trained on the attackers. They're targeting the chamber's gravity controls, Zarek called out, their crystalline form deflecting enemy fire. If they overload it, the whole section could decompress. Sarah finished, understanding the pirate's strategy. The Academy's combat chamber was built to withstand internal explosions, but a gravity system overload would tear it apart and create a distraction for whatever their real objective was. Protect the control hub, Kirax ordered. Chen, can you move? Sarah was already pushing off the wall, using the low gravity to her advantage. Moving to intercept. The pirates had clearly not expected serious resistance in a training area. Their surprise at facing a coordinated defense gave Squad Kirax a momentary advantage, one they pressed ruthlessly. Sarah reached the gravity controls just as one of the pirates was placing demolition charges. The attacker spun, bringing up their weapon, but Sarah was faster. Years of training in variable gravity conditions paid off as she executed a perfect zero grapple, redirecting the pirate's momentum into a wall. The impact sent waves of agony through her burned side, but she maintained her hold. Controls secured, she reported through gritted teeth. Across the chamber, her squad mates were holding their own. Kirax's natural armor and four-armed combat style made her a nightmare in close quarters, while Zarek's energy form allowed them to attack from impossible angles. Then everything went wrong at once. A second explosion rocked the chamber, this time from above. More pirates dropped in, including a massive Kraxan warrior whose reinforced combat suit bristled with weapons. Sarah recognized the species, silicon-based life forms with crystalline armor and immense strength. Secondary team confirmed, Kirax announced, her voice tight. They're trying to box us in. The Kraxan leader leveled a heavy weapon at the gravity controls, and at Sarah. Move or die, soft skin. Sarah's response was to brace herself more firmly in front of the controls. Neither. The blast caught her square in the chest. Even through combat armor, it felt like being hit by a ground transport. She heard ribs crack, felt the burning sensation of internal damage. The low gravity meant she didn't fall, but rather drifted, blood floating in tiny droplets around her. Chen is down, she heard Zarek report, their usual cool tone carrying an edge of concern. But Sarah wasn't down. Not yet. Using her mag boots to anchor herself, she brought her weapon back up. Each breath was agony, but her hands remained steady. Still in position. The Kraxan's crystalline features shifted in what might have been surprise. You should be unconscious. Human biology. Sarah managed, firing a precise burst that cracked the warrior's armor. Full of surprises, that became the turning point. While the pirates had superior numbers and firepower, they hadn't counted on facing a squad that had learned to combine their diverse abilities so effectively. They certainly hadn't expected a human to continue fighting with injuries that would have incapacitated most species. Kirax coordinated their defense with brutal efficiency, using Sarah's continued protection of the gravity controls as a focal point. Zarek's energy attacks harmonized with the Arxen's more conventional weapons, creating combination strikes that overwhelmed the pirates' defenses. When Academy security finally breached the sealed doors, they found Squad Kirax still in formation, surrounded by subdued attackers. Sarah remained at her post by the gravity controls, conscious through sheer force of will. Medical team to combat chamber. She heard someone call, the words seeming to come from very far away. Priority 1. We have a human with severe trauma who's somehow still standing. Of course she's still standing. Kirax replied, her mandibles clicking in what had become her version of proud amusement. She's Squad Kirax. As the medical team approached, Sarah finally allowed herself to acknowledge the full extent of her injuries. The last thing she saw before losing consciousness was the look of absolute respect in the Kraxan leader's crystalline eyes. Respect not for her strength or armor, but for the sheer determination that kept her fighting long past what should have been possible. In the days that followed, the story spread throughout the Academy. How a human, despite being the physically weakest species present, had held position with injuries that would have killed most others. It wasn't just a story about human endurance anymore. It was a lesson about how true strength comes in many forms, and how sometimes the greatest power lies not in being unbreakable, but in continuing even after you've been broken. Unity through understanding. The Academy's medical bay was unusually crowded. 3 weeks had passed since the pirate attack, and while most of the injured had recovered, a steady stream of visitors continued to flow through its doors. They came from every species and rank, all seeking the same destination, the recovery pod where Sarah Chen was healing. Through the pod's transparent surface, medical monitors displayed her progress. Humans, the doctors had discovered, healed differently than most species. No rapid regeneration like the Arxens, no energy-based reconstruction like the Meridians. Instead, their bodies worked through a slower but remarkably thorough process of repair and adaptation. Fascinating. Director Vexthor observed, his compound eyes studying the medical readouts. Their bodies actually grow stronger at the injury sites. The broken bones will be denser, the damaged muscle tissue more resilient. Kirax, who had taken to spending her off hours in the medical bay, clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. They learn from damage. Even their bodies refused to accept limitations. The medical pod's sensors detected increased brain activity. Sarah was waking up again, this time more fully than her previous brief periods of consciousness. As her eyes opened, she found her squad arranged around her pod, along with several Academy officials. "Status report," she asked, her voice rough but steady. "The pirates have been detained." Karax responded immediately. Their target was the Academy's classified research database. Thanks to our squad's defense of the combat chamber, security had time to prevent the main infiltration team from reaching it. Sarah attempted to sit up, then thought better of it as her body reminded her of its numerous repairs in progress. "Casualties? None fatal," Director Vexthor answered. "Though you came closer than most. Your actions have prompted some interesting discussions among our faculty." "Discussions about what, sir?" "About strength," Zarek chimed in, their crystalline form pulsing with unusual warmth. "About how we have perhaps been limited in our understanding of it." The director nodded, his antennae twitching in what Sarah had learned was a sign of deep thought. "We designed our training programs around species with natural advantages: armor, regeneration, energy manipulation. We never considered that lacking these traits could itself be a form of strength. Humans evolved without these advantages," Sarah explained, shifting carefully to a more comfortable position. "We had to develop different kinds of strength: endurance, adaptability, the ability to keep going even when our bodies tell us to stop." "Yes," Karax agreed, "but it is more than that. Your presence in our squad has changed how we all perform. We have learned to fight differently, to think differently." It was true. The combat records showed that Squad Karax had developed unique tactics that played to each member's strengths while compensating for their weaknesses. They had achieved things that shouldn't have been possible for any single species. "The Academy's purpose," Director Vexthor said, "has always been to develop the finest combat specialists in the galaxy. But perhaps we have been too focused on individual capabilities rather than the strength that comes from true cooperation and understanding." The director's words carried weight. The Academy had stood for centuries as a symbol of martial excellence, its methods unchanged, its traditions sacred. Yet here was its leader suggesting that those very traditions might need to evolve. "We would like you to help us design new training protocols," he continued. "Once you have recovered, of course. Protocols that will teach our students not just how to fight, but how to learn from each other's strengths." Sarah looked at her squadmates, at Karax's proud stance, at Zarek's supportive glow, at the other aliens she had come to know as family. "I would be honored, sir. Though I think my squad has already started that process." The medical bay's lights dimmed slightly as evening approached, but the discussion continued. Officers and instructors joined in, eager to understand how a supposedly fragile species had produced warriors capable of such extraordinary feats. Sarah answered their questions patiently, though she knew the real answer was simple. Humans weren't extraordinary because of any special ability, but because they refused to accept that anything was impossible. As the days passed and Sarah's strength returned, the Academy began to change. Training squads were reorganized to maximize species diversity. Combat courses were redesigned to teach adaptation rather than just power. Most importantly, students began to look beyond their preconceptions about other species' limitations. The pirates' attack, meant to expose the Academy's vulnerabilities, had instead revealed its greatest potential strength: the ability to grow, to adapt, to become more than the sum of its parts. Just as human bones grew stronger at the points where they had broken, the Academy was emerging from this crisis stronger than before. One evening, as Sarah was finally cleared to return to limited training, she found Karax waiting outside the medical bay. "The combat chamber has been repaired," the Arxian said, all four arms crossed in what had become a familiar pose of challenge and respect. "The squad has maintained our training schedule in your absence." "I'll need time to get back to full capacity," Sarah warned. Karax's mandibles clicked in amusement. "You misunderstand. We have been training in your style. learning to continue despite discomfort, to adapt rather than rely on natural advantages. She paused, her secondary eyes blinking in sequence. It has been enlightening. Sarah smiled, understanding the deeper meaning in her squad leader's words. The academy had always taught its students to be warriors, but now it was teaching them to be something more, pioneers of a new kind of strength, one built not on physical superiority, but on the willingness to learn from every experience, every challenge, every apparent weakness. As they walked together toward the training grounds, Sarah realized that this was perhaps humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, not their endurance or their adaptability, but their ability to show others that limitations only exist if you accept them as absolute. In teaching others this truth, they had begun to forge something unprecedented, a future where strength came not from natural advantages, but from the determination to grow beyond what anyone thought possible. The new standard. The graduation ceremony of the Stellar Combat Academy had always been impressive, but this year was different. The Grand Hall's crystalline dome reflected the light of 3 setting suns, casting rainbow patterns across a gathering that represented the greatest change in the Academy's 1,000-year history. Sarah Chen stood at attention among her squadmates, her dress uniform bearing the marks of her achievements. The silver stripe of the Trial of Elements, the combat cluster for the pirate attack, and most notably, the golden nova that marked her as the architect of the Academy's new combat doctrine. Director Vex Thor addressed the assembled graduates, his voice carrying the weight of tradition and the promise of change. When this training cycle began, we thought we knew what made a warrior. We had centuries of tradition, countless generations of experience. We were, I admit, certain of our understanding. His compound eyes swept across the gathering, lingering on Squad Kirax. We were wrong. A murmur rippled through the crowd. For a Thoraxian director to admit error was unprecedented. True strength, he continued, is not merely in the armor we wear or the weapons we carry. It is not in regenerative abilities or natural defenses. It is in the will to continue when continuation seems impossible. In the ability to turn apparent weakness into unexpected strength, in the courage to face limitations not as barriers, but as challenges to be overcome. Sarah felt Kirax shift beside her, all 4 arms held in the formal position of pride. Beyond her, Zarek's crystalline form pulsed with contained emotion. This graduating class, the director declared, is the first to complete our new integrated training protocols. You have not simply learned to fight. You have learned to adapt, to innovate, to draw strength from diversity. Each of you has discovered abilities you never knew you possessed, inspired by the examples of your squadmates. The evidence was visible in the graduates themselves. Arctians moved with a new fluidity, having learned that their natural armor need not limit their agility. Meridians had developed techniques for sustained operation that went far beyond their species' normal endurance limits. Even the crystalline Zarek had learned to modulate their energy form in ways previously thought impossible. Before I present your final assignments, Vex Thor continued, I wish to announce a change in Academy protocol. Beginning with the next training cycle, all squads will be required to include members from at least 3 different species classifications. Furthermore, the position of Combat Integration Specialist has been created. He turned to face Sarah directly. Candidate Chen, step forward. Sarah advanced with measured steps, her movements precise despite the lingering effects of her injuries. The medical staff had warned that some of the damage would never completely heal, but like everything else, she had adapted. Your actions during your time here have demonstrated not just the potential of your own species, but the untapped potential in all of us. The Academy offers you the position of Chief Combat Integration Specialist. You will oversee the implementation of the new training protocols and continue to develop ways to maximize interspecies cooperation. Sarah's voice rang clear in the hushed hall. I accept, Director. There is more, Vex Thor added. The Galactic Defense Council has taken note of our results. They have requested that similar integration programs be implemented across all military training facilities. They require someone to oversee this expansion. He gestured to a figure stepping forward from the shadows, a human admiral in full dress uniform. Sarah recognized her immediately. Admiral Helena Martinez, the woman who had first proposed sending humans to the Academy. Lieutenant Chen, the admiral said, her smile carrying pride and vindication in equal measure. How would you like to help us change the way the galaxy thinks about combat training? Before Sarah could respond, Kirax stepped forward. Director, with respect, Squad Kirax volunteers to assist in this implementation. Zark chimed in agreement. Our experiences together have proven the effectiveness of these methods. We would be the optimal demonstration unit. The director's mandibles clicked in amusement. I had assumed you would say that. The Council has already approved the formation of a special demonstration unit, comprised of veterans of the new training protocols. You will show others what we have learned here, that true strength lies not in individual power, but in the ability to grow beyond our perceived limitations. As the ceremony concluded and assignments were distributed, Sarah found herself surrounded by her squadmates, her family. They had begun as a collection of individuals, each proud of their species' natural advantages. They had become something more, a testament to the power of adaptation, cooperation, and the stubborn refusal to accept limitations. So, Kirax said, her secondary eyes gleaming with amusement, ready to show the galaxy what real strength looks like. Sarah looked at her squad, at the graduates around them, at the academy that had transformed from a bastion of tradition into a beacon of innovation. She thought of all the future students who would learn not just to be warriors, but to be pioneers, pushing the boundaries of what their species thought possible. Always ready, she replied with a smile. After all, limitations only exist if you accept them. Above them, the three suns of Nexus Prime painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, a reminder of how far they had come and how far they had yet to go. The Academy spires reached toward those distant stars, no longer just a symbol of martial tradition, but a promise of what was possible when different species learned to see strength in their differences. The graduation ceremony ended, but it marked only the beginning. Across the galaxy, word was spreading of a new kind of warrior, one who drew power not from natural advantages, but from the determination to exceed all expectations. And at the heart of this change was a simple truth that humanity had brought to the stars. The greatest strength lies not in never falling, but in rising every time you fall, in pushing beyond what others think possible, in refusing to accept that anything is truly impossible. The future beckoned, full of challenges and opportunities. Squad Kirax stood ready to face it together, their diversity their strength, their determination their shield. They would show the galaxy that true power comes not from what you are born with, but from what you choose to become.